Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. There was a strong police presence on the city's west side on Wednesday as a standoff resulted in a man being taken into custody. We hear from the founder of the Centre, a Place of Hope, who has ideas on how to overcome anxiety during COVID-19 lockdowns. And in business news, a surge in Canadian trading of internet-promoted stocks, including BlackBerry and GameStop, led to stock halts and trading disruptions yesterday.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. A large Lethbridge police presence was felt at a West Side neighborhood on Wednesday night. Officers were in a standoff with a 34-year-old man for several hours. Police were called to the area at around 2 o'clock in the afternoon after being made aware of concerning phone calls the man was having with other people. After hearing of weapons in the home and struggling to establish communication, the critical incident response team and tactical units were deployed. LPS set off distraction devices after efforts to communicate with the man were unsuccessful. At about 5:45 p.m., the man was taken into custody. Fortunately, there were no injuries. Charges were not laid as the incident was related to mental health. 10 firearms and nearly $250,000 worth of drugs, cash, and vehicles were seized following a series of search warrants in Lethbridge. Alert raided 5 homes and busted 5 suspected drug dealers.
Alert alleges these individuals were part of a drug trafficking network that supplied drugs throughout the Lethbridge area. In a search of the homes, Alert sees a variety of drugs, including a large amount of cocaine, ketamine, psilocybin mushrooms, GHB, and LSD. Alert sees 10 firearms, including a handgun, 2 shotguns, 7 rifles. I'm always concerned when firearms are associated with drugs. Alert also sees a substantial amount of cash, nearly $160,000, and 4 vehicles that were being used to transport and facilitate drug transactions.
Alert seized more than $200,000 in drugs and cash and took 10 firearms out of the hands of suspected drug dealers. 5 individuals now face a litany of serious drug and firearms charges that will be brought before the courts. This investigation exemplifies the success Alert is having by working alongside our policing partners, such as Lethbridge Police and the RCMP.
The confiscated firearms, which include a handgun, 2 shotguns, and 7 rifles, will be subject to a forensic analysis. Lethbridge officially welcomed its new Police Commission chair. Wednesday night, the commission voted in favor of Rob Van Spronson as the new chair. He'd been filling in since Simon Griffith stepped down weeks ago. Van Spronson had sat on the Police Commission for the past 5 years and has been the vice chair for the past year. We caught up with him to find out what his goals are for the upcoming year.
I know that the KPMG report came out for the City Council, and they had, I think, about 6 sort of opportunities for the police service. One of them dealt with the commission in terms of working closely with council. So that's kind of our goal, is to really work at that piece, making sure that we're aligning ourselves with council, with the police service, and making sure that we're all kind of on the same page. Because of the things that are going on in the city in terms of the rising crime rates and stuff like that, they're looking to make sure that we are using the resources efficiently and effectively.
A judge has denied bail to a teenager charged with first-degree murder in the hit-and-run death of a Calgary police officer. The teen, who cannot be identified, was charged along with 19-year-old Amir Abdulrahman in the death of Sergeant Andrew Harnett on December 31st. Police say Harnett was hit and dragged while attempting to stop an SUV after noticing its plates did not match the registration. They allege the accused youth was driving the vehicle and the 19-year-old was the passenger. The Western Hockey League announced on Thursday that it has been granted approval by the province for return to play in Alberta. It will enable the WHL's Alberta-based teams to begin their 24-game regular season schedule in the Central Division, beginning play on Friday, February 26th. The schedule will allow for a maximum of 1 opponent per week with a 5-day break prior to playing a new opponent. As a result, the Central game divisions will be played on weekends and consist of home-and-home games only. WHL players and staff from the Alberta-based clubs will begin self-quarantining on January 30th and then report to their respective clubs on February 6th when they'll be required to undergo COVID-19 testing. As you've heard on Bridge City News, there is a supply issue when it comes to the COVID-19 vaccine. Alberta Health Minister Tyler Shandro expressed his concern that Ottawa is simply not doing enough to ensure that Albertans receive their fair share of doses.
Canada should have negotiated priority, and they're not letting us see the contracts, the purchase contracts that they have with the manufacturers. I've asked about them, and that we call the FPT calls, the federal, provincial, territorial calls with all the health ministers. Fair enough, they can't disclose what's in those contracts, but we need, as the provinces and as every Canadian, we need to understand what certainty and what predictability did Canada negotiate in those contracts to give Canada at least equal priority over, for example, the other nations that are getting their supply out of the Belgian facility.
Pet ownership has gone through the roof, with so many people feeling isolated and working from home during the lockdowns. Now the influx of new four-legged patients has veterinarians struggling to keep up.
We have seen a surge of people getting puppies and kittens. So we've been doing lots of vaccine appointments, lots of new puppy, new kitten exams, as well as spays and neuters, because we have a large population of new pets in a lot of people's households lately. Anytime you're going to be getting an animal, you're committed to that animal for its life. And so, with a dog, that's going to be at least 10 years, some dogs up to 15, cats, same thing, 15 to 20 years sometimes. And so, it's really important that when people are making these decisions, it's not just off the cusp, and they are really putting some thought into this animal and what it's going to need and require, vaccinations, health exams, like yearly checkups.
The Canadian Veterinary Medical Association says there are only about 10,000 veterinarians nationwide. The greatest shortfall is in British Columbia, Quebec, and Newfoundland and Labrador. There's a lot to unpack when it comes to the Alberta government's new Small and Medium Business Enterprise Grant for Sole Proprietors. The relaunch grant offers up to $20,000 to businesses that experienced a minimum 30% revenue decrease due to the pandemic. This now includes businesses that opened between March 1st and October 31st of 2020. While many have already applied and secured funding, the Business Council of Alberta says there are specific industries that have been the hardest hit and can easily burn through $20,000 in order to survive.
I think we'll really be looking for what's the next wave of business supports to try and get us back to normal. And particularly, I've got an eye on our hardest hit industries. That would be things like, travel, tourism, airlines, hotels, and some of those really high touch customer facing businesses. We talked about restaurants and gyms are included within that as well. So I think we're going to need to look at focusing some further supports and our attention as a society, even where we spend our money on those businesses that have been hurt the most.
Unregistered sole proprietors can now apply for the grant starting on February the 4th. The government of Alberta announced it is investing $17 million into performing arts, sports, and rodeo organizations. Officials say it's in response to organizations which have lost a full season of programming and revenue due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In a statement today, Minister of Culture Leela Sharon Ahir said this funding is critical to supporting venues and events that build and sustain vibrant communities, our cultural heritage, and our mental well-being. Qualifying organizations will be eligible for a one-time grant of up to 25% of eligible expenses based on 2018 and 2019 financials. Applications will be accepted until midnight, February the 18th. Chuck Masick is a guy who needed a job, so he created a very successful business in the medical field. Chuck is the founder of Vanguard Medical Concepts. He says in order to become a successful entrepreneur, there must be key steps you have to follow.
First, understand the costs. Then understand the risk. The first question I ask myself when I'm going to do a business, the first thing I ask myself, is this going to kill me? I check that box, no. Okay. Next box, I say, am I going to lose all my money and all my wealth? Check that box, no. And then I say, okay, now what are the real risks here? Because they say entrepreneurs take risks. That's not true. Entrepreneurs manage risk.
Catch the full interview with Chuck Masick, founder of Vanguard Medical Concepts, and Jeanette Rocher coming up after Business News. According to Stats Canada, during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic and during a one-month period last spring, close to 50,000 Canadians said they felt feelings of depression, anxiety, and fear. Many church leaders have been there to help those dealing with those kinds of struggles. You can include Pastor Joel Klemick in that group. Pastor Joel is with the Miss City Church in Lethbridge, Alberta. Pastor Joel, how have you been able to help those who've been suffering from depression as a result of a job loss or major anxiety during these lockdowns?
one of the things we do repeatedly is reminding people that we are still here, that we haven't gone anywhere, that we're available and accessible, and just a phone call, an email, a text message away. And I can't personally be there for every single person, but we've made a promise that someone is available. There's always somebody available. And that it is 100% normal to need to reach out to someone. We all need someone. That's why we're a body. That's why the body of Christ is a body with many members. No one person can do life in isolation. So it's critical to know there's someone to reach out to and to know how to reach out, and that it's absolutely normal to need to. We always say in stressful times, it is normal to feel stress, to feel that depression, to feel that anxiety. That's a normal response. The person who doesn't feel any stress or any sense of feeling down or sadness, that person probably isn't healthy. So all of us, we all always feel at first we need to be able to reach out and just know there's someone there.
What scripture have you found that can be an inspiration to offer people hope during these dark times?
In my personal time of devotion, working with others, one chapter I love to turn to over and over again is Romans 15. The whole chapter is packed full a great encouragement on how we need each other, how to stay connected with one another. And right in the heart of the chapter is verse 13 that says, "May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit." He's a God of hope. Our world is in short supply of hope right now. But as we trust in him, he's going to give us the joy we need, the peace we need, and not only the hope we need, but hope through us to fill others. It's there. I believe it's there. We can turn to him repeatedly to find it.
So what advice would you give to other pastors who are trying to help others who are feeling so low during the lockdowns?
Monitor and manage how you're doing. Physically, are you resting and eating and managing yourself well? Make sure you're taking those Sabbaths. Spiritually, relationally, make sure someone knows what's going on in your heart and in your mind, that knows how you're doing and knows how to encourage you. I have people I reach out to both in my city and beyond, mentors who I trust, who I know understand me and can encourage me when I need it. And I make sure I'm reaching out to do it. It's my responsibility.
That was Pastor Joel Klemick with the Mist City Church in Lethbridge, Alberta. The Mustard Seed is no longer pursuing a safe, sober house at the Ramada and Chinook Motel on Mayor McGrath Drive in Lethbridge. The news comes after the nonprofit was denied federal funding from the Rapid Housing Initiative. The Christian Alberta-based charity has set its sights on a property now located at Western One on the city's south side. Spokesperson Byron Bradley says they're not giving up getting homeless people their own keys. He says they're willing to be transparent with people in whichever neighborhood they secure.
We are new in this community, and that trust and that respect is going to build over time. I've had the personal privilege and honor of meeting a number of businesses in that community already. I've met with about 20 of those businesses in the community already, face-to-face, and knocked on a lot of other doors, and are telling the community, these business owners and managers, that we will stand shoulder to shoulder with them. We do not allow loitering on the properties of the Mustard Seed. That is not always seen in other like agencies.
The Mustard Seed say they will be engaging with community members in the area as they work with the city on a new zoning application. January has been a very difficult month for many people. The pandemic, along with the lockdowns, have only highlighted the struggles communities around the world are facing. In response, the team behind the Eternal Wall of Answered Prayer in the United Kingdom has launched an online initiative to offer the hope of Christ during such uncertain times. We have more now in this report.
This is my story.
Christians whose prayers have been answered are being encouraged to tell their stories online to make hope visible in the midst of the COVID pandemic. The Answered Prayer Challenge, launched on January the 25th, aims to flood social media with stories of hope and faith in Christ during these challenging times. The initiative is part of the UK-based landmark set to open in 2022, the Eternal Wall of Answered Prayer. Their founder is Richard Gamble.
The idea is that, very simply, we're encouraging Christians to post a story of answered prayer, whether that's by video or written. Just share with your followers, your family, your friends, the thing that Jesus has done in your life. And then really simply nominate 3 other people, challenge them to do the same. And we hope that way we'll be able to just get some positivity and hope for people on social media, and they'll be able to find the hope that we have in Jesus.
Meanwhile, Carrie Lloyd, one of the leaders from Bethel Church, explains why she believes this initiative is so significant.
I'm aware of what encouragement and the impartation of those testimonies onto other people, that it's actually a gift to share with other people, not just something to share with myself and with the Lord.
And the Answered Prayer Challenge will continue through until the end of February. Peter Wooding for the Global News Alliance.
Federal opposition politicians are urging the Liberal government to move quickly to put new restrictions on international travel as COVID-19 variants spread. New Health Canada data is showing an increase in infections directly connected to foreign arrivals. There are more than 50 cases of the UK variant confirmed in Canada. Most involve people who recently traveled into the country. Conservative health critic Michelle Rempel-Garner wants Ottawa to require a mandatory rapid COVID-19 test for arrivals and have that test repeated midway through the 2-week quarantine period. A motion that called on the City of Regina to restrict fossil fuel companies from advertising or sponsoring with the city has been scrapped. This was after City Council got an earful from the oil and gas industry and many of its supporters. Last week, most of Council's executive committee voted in favor of the motion and faced immediate pushback from business and political leaders. A rookie councillor who brought the proposal forward changed his mind yesterday and asked for the motion to be dropped. Council voted unanimously to do so. Saskatchewan set a new high yesterday for COVID-19 hospitalizations. The province reported 220 patients in hospital, along with 36 in intensive care. That is the highest number since January 15th, when 210 were reported. Government officials say there were 149 new cases, with the overall infection total in Saskatchewan now at almost 23,000. Fortunately, close to 20,000 have also recovered. Almost 35,000 COVID-19 vaccines have also been delivered in Saskatchewan. Victoria, BC's largest arena is being reactivated as a temporary shelter for the homeless. The BC government says it has signed a lease through BC Housing that will allow the Save on Foods Memorial Centre to be used for housing beginning in March. It says the move marks a huge step forward, meeting the city and the province's joint goal of securing enough indoor spaces for those living in encampments in Victoria. The facility will provide shelter and wraparound supports for up to 45 people experiencing homelessness. Many cities struggle with homelessness. Now, a trio in Charlotte, North Carolina is offering hope in a unique way. Once a month, they bring clothes to the city's largest tent encampment site and invite residents to shop for free.
I was stressed out when I learned about the encampments because I grew up homeless. I already knew what it was like to be homeless, what the real issues with homelessness are, and what needed to be at least collected. And I thought that would be valuable, but I didn't know why. I was just like, we need to collect stuff and I'm going to figure it out. And so my grandma dismantled her deck. They got a new deck built. So me and Tyler took all the wood and turned it into 2 donation stations.
We're going out with notebooks and pencils, and we would go meet every single person at each camp and ask them what their needs were.
We have on our like homepage, it's direct request from 10 City, and I put their first name and their request.
We found a donor that donated us the racks to get it off the ground and on racks and create more of a real life retail experience to where it doesn't
It's retail
cost anything.
therapy.
And it's much more humanizing
Yeah.
and creates like more of a real experience, you know what I mean? Not just like dig through this box and hopefully you'll find a pair of shoes that match.
What we see is their spirits lit. We see them smiling.
We had an overcast day with some light flurries and cool temperatures, but fortunately, the warmer temperatures are on the horizon for southwestern Alberta. Complete weather details are coming up. It felt a lot more like winter today in Lethbridge, cool and snowy, but fortunately sunshine and warmer temperatures will be arriving soon. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a complete look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, a high pressure system should be here to clear out a lot of those clouds soon?
Yeah, that's right, Hal. It's going to move into southern Alberta here and bring with it lots of sunshine and some plus temperatures. We could even see some double digits by Monday. So exciting news considering, what is that, February 1st by then. Okay, so into tonight, overnight low minus 16, going to feel quite a bit chillier with the wind chill minus 24. Wind only at about 15 kilometers per hour. Could get some fog patches, which will be dissipating in the morning. The clouds should clear up for sunshine on Friday with a high of minus 6. 5 degrees should be our high for Saturday as we get into the plus temperatures for the weekend. Lots of sunshine too on Saturday and Sunday. 8 degrees expected to be the high on Sunday, all the way up to possibly 11 degrees by Monday under sunny skies. And then the possibility of snow beginning Tuesday overnight to Tuesday night, and then into Wednesday, 60% chance of flurries as well. And that temperature is going to drop by the end of, or by the beginning of next week into the middle of next week. Minus 9 the high for Tuesday and minus 12 for Wednesday. Average high for this time of year, minus 1, minus 13 the average low. 14 was our high temperature back in 1988. And it was a chilly minus 38 back in 1969. Sun rose this morning at 8:09 a.m. and our sunset this evening right at 5:20 p.m. So days definitely getting longer. Let's take a look at what's happening tomorrow across the nation for our highs. Victoria, mainly cloudy, 6 degrees the high, 5 the high for Vancouver tomorrow with a mix of sun and cloud. Into Edmonton, lots of sunshine across Alberta tomorrow, minus 10 the high for Edmonton, minus 4 for Calgary. I know we're in Chinook territory, but the wind is only going to be about 15 kilometers per hour. It's the rest of the country that's getting a whole lot of wind by tomorrow, including these cities here sitting at 20 to 30 kilometer per hour winds, minus 10 the high in Saskatoon, chance of flurries there. Regina's high, minus 8 and minus 9 the high in Winnipeg tomorrow with mainly cloudy skies. Keep in mind those prairie cities can feel a lot chillier with that wind chill as well. In Toronto tomorrow, chance of flurries, minus 6 the high, minus 12 in Ottawa, minus 10 tomorrow in Montreal. These cities also going to be feeling the wind tomorrow, 20 to 30 kilometers per hour. And into the Maritimes, Fredericton's high minus 6 with chance of flurries. Halifax mainly cloudy. Minus 2 is the high there, minus 3 in Charlottetown. Charlottetown could get quite a bit of snow, 60% chance of snow tomorrow. Minus 4 the high in St. John's, Newfoundland with a mix of sun and cloud. So there you have it. There is your weather forecast.
Today's weather is brought to you by Four Seasons Home Comforts, experts in heating, AC, and fireplace install and repair.
A surge in Canadian trading of internet-promoted stocks, including BlackBerry and GameStop, led to stock halts and trading disruptions yesterday. The Investment Industry Regulatory Organization suspended trading of BlackBerry twice as shares surged more than 40% amid triple the usual trading volume. It came amid a social media-based push that has fueled huge price gains and high trading volume for BlackBerry, GameStop, and other stocks. Mike Timchuk is a trader in Medicine Hat, Alberta, and explains some of the chaos that unfolded yesterday.
So basically, retail investors took the other side. So it's called a short squeeze. So they want to pile money into, they call it YOLO on Reddit, which is you only live once. So, hey, if you want to put your hard-earned money in GameStop, AMC, whatever stock that might be, they did that. And if it's a fair game, I'm all for that, but unfortunately the hedge funds and that took away the buy button because they lost, $1.6 billion in one day. But I feel really bad for the small guy that wasn't able to hit the buy button and watch the hedge funds squeak back some of their money they lost. It wasn't fair for the little guy. So that's the scary thing about this is that it's they changed the rules on the fly. So there's people that are gonna hopefully open up a thing with the Securities and Exchange Commission and take them to court. And I hope they get all their money back.
Samsung Electronics says its operating profit for the last quarter rose by more than 26%. But the South Korean tech giant expects its profit to weaken in the current quarter with a weak dollar and costs associated with expanded production lines. The company's dual strength in parts and finished products allowed Samsung to thrive during the coronavirus pandemic. Analysts say they do not expect big changes in spending plans by Canadian oil and gas producers this year as they roll out fourth quarter results. Analysts are predicting producers will maintain spending discipline this year as optimism from stronger oil prices is offset by fears about the impact of new COVID-19 variants. They say the energy demand picture is still very much uncertain in the near term. Now, Here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 232 points on the day to finish at 17,657. The Dow was up 300 to 30,603. The S&P 500 was up 36 points to 3787, and the Nasdaq was up 66 points on the day to finish at 13,337. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 51 cents to 52.34 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 4 cents to 2.66 US. Gold was down 30 cents to 18.42.86 US an ounce, and silver was unchanged on the day at 26.50 US an ounce. Wheat is at $297 per metric ton, barley's at $302, canola's at $6.98, and corn is at $340 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 45 cents to $116. Feeder cattle were up 8 cents to $135.70, and lean hogs were down 63 cents to $69.95. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 78.01 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, 10 firearms and nearly $250,000 worth of cash, drugs, and vehicles were seized following a series of search warrants in Lethbridge. Alert raided 5 homes and arrested 5 suspected drug dealers. The firearms, which included a prohibited handgun, 2 shotguns, and 7 rifles, will be subject of a forensic analysis. It is not easy launching a business and becoming a successful entrepreneur, especially during a pandemic. Coming up, Jeanette Rocher chats with Chuck Masick, the founder and former president of Vanguard Medical Concepts, who has tips for us on starting a new business. That Q&A is on deck.
Many of us have dreams to make it big, but how do you actually go about making this a reality? Today's guest did just that. Chuck Masick is the founder and former president of Vanguard Medical Concepts and author of At War with the Big Dogs, How One Man in Need of a Job Started a $1 billion Industry. Chuck joins me via Zoom from Tampa, Florida. Chuck, thank you so much and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I look forward to talking with you.
Absolutely. So Chuck, first of all, can you give us all a brief snapshot of what your book is all about?
Well, it's a true story about a group of men and women. We called ourselves the Vander Brothers. We started an industry that had never been done before, and the industry was about reprocessing devices labeled single use. As you can imagine, the manufacturer were upset with us. And the whole story is about how this group of people, over a period of about 17 years, were able to survive and grow and get registered with the FDA, and finally was able to be bought by another company.
Interesting. Okay. So you know what it's like to be looking for a job and not being sure of what your true purpose was. So can you share a bit about those struggles in the beginning there?
Well, you know, it's interesting about life. You don't normally start out knowing what you want to do. And I tell people, particularly young people, I said, look, they'll say, I want to be an entrepreneur. I say, well, let's first step back. What are you good at? You see, God gives everybody talents. The job of a young person, or one of the jobs, is what is your talent? They'll say, well, how do you do that? I said, well, it's easy. There's a saying in the counsel of many is wisdom. I said, what you need to do is ask everybody. Ask your parents, ask your siblings, ask your boss, your pastor. You ask enough people, they will tell you what you're good at. Because the thing about a talent is it comes so naturally to someone, they think it's easy. But not everybody can do what everybody else does. When you understand what you're good at, then pursue that. Because what you'll find when you pursue that, you'll pursue happiness. Forget about the money. The money may or may not come, but you won't go to work anymore. You'll go to Joyville, okay? And your life will be complete. So they'll say, well, yeah, but if I want to become an entrepreneur, I say, well, listen, an entrepreneur is not what you do, it's who you are. And from the time I can remember, even as a young boy, I was always asking, why can't you do that? Why can't you do this? I always questioned things. In business, when I started out, well, that doesn't work. I can do better than that. Even though I probably couldn't. I was always questioning. People say I have a problem with authority. That's probably to some degree true, but always questioning. And I would say to an entrepreneur, someone who just doesn't take the status quo. In fact, he's almost repulsed by the status quo. And so that was who I am. I didn't know that at the time because I thought I was just someone who couldn't keep a job. But turns out that God had plans for me that I didn't know about. In fact, I'll tell you a real quick story. I'm going to college. I got out of the military. I had to decide what I was going to be. And I was terrified of public speaking, which sounds crazy for a salesman, I know. Anyway, I picked the only course at Louisiana Tech that did not require a speech course. And that was Med tech, didn't know anything about it, but I'll be that. Went to med tech, graduated, couldn't make any money, went back and got my master's degree in clinical microbiology, went back to work in a hospital, couldn't make money. And from there, I became an entrepreneur. But you know what God did? He used everything in my life. That medical degree, medical technology and microbiology, I've used all my life in the medical business. So I guess being an entrepreneur at the end of the day is just not taking the status quo, okay? But I say to all young people, be what God intends you to be and you will be content. If you fight against that, you're trying to put a round peg in a square hole and it never works.
I like those metaphors there, good little bits of wisdom. So Chuck, at what point did you decide that being an entrepreneur was your calling?
That's a good question. I don't know. It's funny. I don't know that I ever did, except when it just became so obvious. All I was trying to do in my life was supposedly get ahead. It's funny, when you get there, you go, that's it. I said, that's it. See, once you got the money, there's no happiness. I still live in the same house I've lived in for 30 years, 40 years. I live in a big house, but I don't, because that's not important to me. What was important to me was to get somewhere, and I got there. And you know what? I found out I was just as happy now as I was back then. Nothing changed. My wife is faithful. I have all the things that count in life, all the important things.
And what type of advice would you have for someone who is trying to get a business started?
Well, I'll tell you a funny story. This older guy, he seemed older at the time, he was probably 60. He said, Chuck, there's only 3 rules to be successful in business. I said, really? I got my pencil out. What are they? He goes, never run out of cash. I wrote it down. What's the second rule? Never run out of cash. Oh, what's the third rule? Never run out of cash. Now that sounds funny, but you know what? Many people have gone broke by not counting the cost. But of course, that goes back to the Bible too. You're supposed to count the cost before you build a house, or you look like a fool. So that's part of the name of being successful is first understand the cost, then understand the risk. The first question I ask myself when I'm going to do a business, the first thing I ask myself, is this going to kill me? I check that box, no. Okay. Next box, I say, am I going to lose all my money and all my wealth? Check that box, no. And then I say, okay, now what are the real risks here? Because they say entrepreneurs take risks. That's not true. Entrepreneurs manage risk. That's what they do. Okay. I would say too, behind the backdrop, I don't know why I'm this way, but for some reason in my whole life, I've never worried about things. I just don't. My wife tends to worry, and I love her for that. In fact, one time during Vanguard days, we were having troubles and she was worried. I said, honey, you don't worry. I'll do the worrying. You can take a break. She goes, no, you say you're worried, but you won't worry. I have to do it. So anyway, that's it.
Yeah. Now, Chuck, you just mentioned Vanguard. So maybe tell us a little bit about how you went about starting Vanguard Medical Concepts. How'd that come about?
Well, I'd like to have how great a thought person I was, how great an entrepreneur, but everything happens because of other things. I had made a big investment in Haiti, and I lost about $2 million in Haiti and everything. I was 40 years old, had 4 children between 13 and 7, $250,000 in debt, and we're going to lose a house. And let me tell you, that's not a place you want to be, because my wife was obviously, her house and her home is very important to her. And I thought that I may lose my wife over this, but you know what she did? She circled the wagons, and anybody that would attack me, she would defend. I tell people all the time, you can call me a turkey, but if you do it in front of my wife, you'll just gain an enemy. So I lost everything. And I said to myself, okay, what I'm going to do, this is bad. I don't know what to do. So I said, what am I good at? Well, I'm good at sales. I'm a good salesman. So I picked up my bag, went back to sales, back to square one. And that's a very humbling experience to do, because you have to do a lot of soul searching. You have to do a lot of self-examination. Was it my fault? Why this happened? It's in the book, by the way. But I'm in the central supply lady's office, and I'm bemoaning my situation. I see a thing on the desk. It's like a suture pack, but it's big. And I said, what's that? So it's a suture pack. We have a company repackage them for us. I said, well, the manufacturer does that for free. Well, they stopped doing that in 1988 because of the AIDS epidemic. Really? Well, I can do that. So I borrowed $20,000 from my parents who were retired. I borrowed $20,000 from my wealthy brother, who's a radiation oncologist, with the promise I wouldn't move in with him when I got old. And I went around suture, Tampa Bay area collecting sutures, and the humble suture pack started the whole industry. That was not a used device, it was just an unpackaged device. And all of a sudden, I realized the hospital said, well, can you do this? Can you reprocess this? Well, I guess we can. Then I realized, well, wait a second, there's a whole industry. I almost got dizzy. Think about all the stuff out there, all the medical devices being thrown away, had been used once and could be reused again. And it was the humble suture pack that started the whole thing.
Wow, that's incredible. Who would have known, right?
Who would have known? Who would have known?
Yeah. So with this company, you ran into a lot of adversity as you built your company, right? So how did you deal with that?
You know, it's interesting. As I told you, I don't particularly worry, but I always do believe this, that things happen for a reason. There's purpose in life. And so as we face these adversities, I realize if we're going to be out of business, then that's up to God. I can't do anything about that. All I can do is my job. And over the years, I saw certain things that had to happen that I didn't know had to happen. And if it didn't happen, we'd be out of business. Now, I can say, look what a great person I am. I know I'd have been out of business, not even know why. The backdrop is the sovereignty of God working through life, okay? Now, look, we did a lot of hard work. We fought a lot of big enemies. But again, it was unbelievable things we went through. I mean, these manufacturers, they lied, they cheated, and they stole. I mean, they did things that were unethical and illegal. But when you're 27 billion, it's hard to sue a $27 billion company.
Yeah, now, these are those big dogs that you're talking about.
These are the big dogs, yeah.
Yeah, so
I'll tell you, one medical company is 27 billion and 25 billion. Then they go down from there. But these are multi-billion-dollar companies. So, you know.
Yeah. So they noticed you and they started to give you troubles.
Well, they did. Many troubles. Yeah.
And how did you and your team deal with
Here's everything they threw at us, we actually turned in our favor. For example, they said to the customers, you got to go down to their plant and see what they're doing, because they're just washing things off of the garden hose. And of course, we had to fly the nurses in and the doctors and the administrators and show them our plant. Very expensive, very time consuming. But guess what happened? They came down and said, wow, this is doable. It does work. You aren't washing things off of the garden hose. It actually helped. Then the manufacturer said, well, they have no government clearance, which was true because the government would not allow us to get our price cleared. We could still market them. And they said, no 510Ks, that's the term they use. And they beat us up with that. And then when we got the clearance, they said, well, that's not important. And one thing after the other. When they finally lost every battle, the final battle was when they went to the FDA commissioner and had him pull 2 of our products off the market. It was done so behind the scenes, and it did hurt us. It did hurt us, but we did recover from that. And again, we prospered actually.
That's amazing. Now, Chuck, you've worked in the healthcare industry for many, many years. So what are your thoughts on the current system? What needs to change?
You know, I'm not an expert in the healthcare system. I can only talk about medical devices. I can say this, that we need to find better ways of making products less expensive and better. You know, the thing that we pay $100 for, in Europe or in Asia, they pay $25 for. And why is that? I don't have all the answers. I just know that we have to provide healthcare at a lower cost, but keep the same quality. And we have a good healthcare system, quite frankly. And I think as Americans, we're merciful. We want to take care of the poor and help. I know I do. But I can't speak for the whole healthcare system. I can only speak for the medical devices.
Got it. Okay. So Chuck, your success wasn't handed to you on a silver platter. We've heard some of the challenges that you've overcome, but tell us a bit about your challenging home life as a kid and then later joining the military, even though your dad suffered from PTSD.
As I said, my dad was a tender-hearted man. He became an artist later in his life. He was a good guy. He really was. But this thing called PTSD, when you live through it, you know, you can say the letters all you want, but what happens then, something sets them off. It could be something as easy as putting your elbow on the table. And they go with a hot flashing temper straight up and straight down. It lasts maybe seconds or minutes, but it's terrifying. I only put one example in the book because I didn't want the book to be about my situation, but there are hundreds of them. I remember when I was 12 years old, my parents fight 3 times a week. One's with blood, 2 without blood. Now, on 8 years, I got to go through so many fights. I said, I can do that. I mean, the kid's rationalized in his head. So when I got out of school, my grades, I graduated at 1.99. I think the region let me graduate because the Vietnam War was on. They figured I'd get drafted anyway. And I left home in the military. It's the only thing I felt where I just felt it was a place to go because I didn't have any skills at the time. And it turned out it was a good place for me to go. And that's where I went. And of course, I was in the Air Force. I wouldn't find anybody. I was stationed in Crete, and it was a beautiful island to be stationed on. So I did quite well there, and then prospered. And as you may not know, I met my wife there.
Right. Yeah. You mentioned that in your book. And of course, you guys went through a season of rough times as well and survived all of that. You've had your share of challenges in life.
It's funny, the answer is yes, but I'll tell you, everything that's happened to me has made me a better person. And I think I've learned more from my failures than I ever did from my successes, because the failures define who you are, how you respond to them. See, it's not it's the old Chinese proverb, fall down 6 times, get up 7. It's not how many times you knock down, it's how many times you get up, okay? So I look back, and my wife and I talked about our upbringing. She had a rough upbringing too, but they all worked for the good. And so I feel blessed for the backgrounds, as strange it may seem. I feel blessed to be here. And I hope that the book will be a blessing to young men and women who read it and say, you know what? They survived that. We can too. It'll be an encouragement,
Yeah, absolutely. You've got such a great story to tell, Chuck, and we thank you so much for your time today. It looks like we are running out of time, but thanks so much, Chuck. Chuck Masick is the author of At War with the Big Dogs. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you.
Worrying about the smallest details and attempting to control situations can sometimes overwhelm us, causing serious anxiety issues. Dr. Gregory Jans is the founder of the Center of Place of Hope, which is one of the top facilities for treatment of depression and anxiety in the United States. He's the author of the book, 7 Answers for Anxiety. Welcome back to Bridge City News, Dr. Jans.
Good to be with you. And boy, what a time for anxiety.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, with COVID-19 going on right now, you say that anxiety is defined as a painful or apprehensive uneasiness. Where do you think that really originates from, and why is it so much worse for some people?
Because we've had trauma in our life. And this period we're in, and you said COVID-19, this is a period of chronic anxiety. It's kind of like a pandemic purgatory. You know what I'm saying? It's like, we're kind of miserable where we are. We don't want to go back to March, and we look ahead to the future, and we're really wondering, wow, how's it going to be? And that's anxiety. Anxiety means how it has hit us physically. It's affecting our sleep. We feel anxiety or we feel fear kind of throughout our whole body.
So, Dr. Jans, how have anxiety and depression cases increased since the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, one of the things we know is the World Health Organization tells us right now, anxiety is the #1 worldwide. It's called a disorder. So it's above heart disease, it's above cancer, it's above depression. Anxiety, so we think about, we have a pandemic, but we have an epidemic in the pandemic, and that's anxiety.
So what's the big difference then, in your opinion, between anxiety and a phobia?
Well, a phobia could be a specific fear. Sometimes we hear the term agoraphobia, which technically means the fear of open places. But here's what we know. Agoraphobia, the fear of going out, has increased. As we've quarantined, as we've confined, as we've isolated, we've also created a fear of going out. I mean, think about the social anxiety right now. People don't know, do I look at you? When do I wear my mask? And everything is socially awkward. I was just with a gentleman today, and he reached over and gave me a big hug. By the way, it was fine with me, but it's like he goes, "Oh no, I shouldn't have done that. I'm so sorry." People don't know what to do, what's okay. That's social anxiety.
How about some of the anxiety and depression our seniors are feeling right now, being isolated from a lot of their family members?
Yes, there's the isolation, and virtual relationships can only go so far. And I'm glad we have those. I'm glad I can see you today and share. But we also know that we need real relationship and actual real life relationships as well. And we know that when that's cut off and cut off abruptly, we find ways to replace that. Unfortunately, among all ages, addictions are up, whether it's a digital addiction, cyber addiction, could be alcohol, and depending on where you live, alcohol sales have really skyrocketed, rotted too. But it's like 500 to 600% more alcohol sales right now.
Why do people with deep anxiety try to control their surroundings?
Any way that I can have control, it makes me feel like, some relief. You see, anxiety is all about gaining some sense of control. This is why when we first had the beginning stages of this pandemic, there was a toilet paper craze. Everybody went out and they bought in herds, bought toilet paper. You don't hear any of that now, but really that was driven because of fear. And fear, we do drastic things and we tend to run in groups. If one person's doing it, go, I have to do something because it gives me that sense of control.
Dr. Jantz, what are some of the hidden assumptions people with anxiety actually believe?
Well, they do believe, and by the way, anxiety or fear always distorts reality. It makes us hypersensitive. At times, it causes us to see things that are not there. It can cause us to be critical. We can be very judgmental because of that anxiety and fear. So one of the things you need to know is anxiety distorts reality.
So what's the big difference then between a person's objective or subjective reality in terms of managing that anxiety?
Well, it doesn't matter if it's all our perception. So anxiety is going to be anxiety, whether it's a real concern or not. And by the way, we're not to be faulted for that. That's just how it works. And you can train your body to constantly feel anxious. We're in a hyper-vigilant state right now. Chronic stress, chronic anxiety, and it's like the state of anxiety we're in has put us in a perpetual state of uncertainty, and we need to understand that's going to have a physical effect. We also know that if we isolate in our relationships with others too much, anxiety will go up. We also know that it can put us in the middle of a real spiritual desert. We can disconnect spiritually.
You know, we talked about, like you said before, using video conferencing, Skype or Zoom to be able to reach out to loved ones, but nothing will really replace giving somebody a hug, a loving embrace, and that one-on-one human interaction and connection. Do you think because we're lacking a lot of that, that's also heightening a lot of the anxiety levels?
Absolutely. You see, comfort comes in touch. Two ways we receive comfort: good, positive words that are comforting, and we also receive it through touch. Boy, there's a power in a hug. We know that touch alters body chemistry. That's right. It releases even endorphins, and chemistry in our body changes when we are hugged, when we're touched. And so we've got to have, humans, by the way, really do need touch. So some of that's been lacking.
Now, you said in the past that fear of the past drains the promise of the future. Can you explain that in more detail?
Sure. We may be traumatized by not only what's going on, but it could be a trigger from the past. Maybe you've struggled with some depression and anxiety. Maybe there's been some real trauma in the past. So now we're in the middle of a pandemic and it's a re-trigger. And so that past kind of gets moved forward. And that moving forward of the past amplifies our present anxiety.
Now, your book seems to suggest that we try to rewire the way we view life by eliminating negative messages. How can we really do this?
Yes, we've got to keep plugging the truth in. And by the way, it's baby steps every day. I do something the old-fashioned way. I pull, 3x5 card. Do you remember those? I have one right here. 3x5 card. I'm going to write a verse. I'm going to write some truth. I'm going to carry this in my pocket, and I'm going to recite that verse or that positive affirmation or truth. My brain needs a way to renew. Otherwise, we keep recycling the negative. I call it ants, automatic negative thoughts.
So how do anxieties maybe create a little bit of a life on overload?
Yeah, it keeps us in overload. So remember, anxiousness, and by the way, it's okay. We're human beings. We may have some worry, we may have some anxiety. It's just how long do we dwell in that? Because it will have implications in our relationships, in our physical well being. A habitual state of anxiety that's chronic over time lowers our immunity. We are going to see people because of anxiety that will have physical concerns. This will happen.
So Dr. Jans, do perfectionists tend to be more prone to anxiety? And if so, why?
Yes, perfectionist. Well, we all know one. And a perfectionist may be a person, it's all got to be just right, just right, just right. And it's never just right. Okay? That's a perfectionist. We like to do an excellent job, but that's different than perfectionism. So perfectionism can step over and be more obsessive compulsive. Obsessive compulsive means I am consumed by my thoughts and my behaviors. And this is a time right now, if you've struggled with, germs and things being clean, right now could be a real struggle. That obsessive thought, we can never get things clean enough. I'm never safe enough. And that's that obsessive compulsiveness that can come out of perfectionism.
Now, there are times in life when anxiety is a normal, healthy response to various circumstances. How can we really tell if we're overreacting?
If you stay in it over time, an initial anxiety when we receive maybe unfavorable or unpleasant news and we're in a state of kind of a shock, and we're shocked by it. And we have a period of recovery after that, of just kind of bringing back our senses and resetting. But if you don't ever reset emotionally, you will find yourself really in an unhealthy state of anxiety. Now, what do humans try to do? We try to self-medicate. I can't handle this anxiety anymore. That's where they drink. That's where they overeat. That's where we do diversion behaviors that at times are self-destructive.
The Bible tells us not to be anxious about anything. Now, that's pretty difficult at the best of times. Is anxiety a sin?
I don't put anxiety as a sin, but I think what we can do with anxiety could end up being sinful. If I end up being engaged in self-destructive behaviors and develop secret addictions, and I start lying and living a double life, I'm really setting myself up for some problems. And so I think it can lead us down the wrong path. But you know what? We're human beings, and we're going to have these experiences. But how long? I mean, right now, pandemic, this is a chance to reset or regret. You'll regret by doing certain things or not doing certain things.
So where does one's personal life fit into the discussion of anxiety?
Well, I think it's an opportunity for us to go, where's my fears in my life? Maybe take 15 minutes, take a notepad, write down what's my top 10 fears. What are the top 10 things that just keep recycling in my mind that I'm dwelling upon? Some of those fears are things that may be totally out of our control, and I'm learning a new way of walking in faith. And maybe I need to match up God's word or a verse to each of those fears and begin to renew my mind because we've got to reset the truth.
Now, you include a very important chapter about the importance of making healthy choices. What does that really look like in practical terms, outside of maybe a few less donuts?
Yeah, well, I think a practical choice goes, how well am I caring for myself? Self-care. That may include things as sleep. If you're anxious, sleep could be disruptive. But here's the other thing. I just talked to somebody the other day, and I think he said he was up to about 12 cups of coffee a day.
Wow.
Well, 12 cups of coffee. He goes, I'm drinking it to soothe me. No, it's not soothing you. It's creating more anxiety. Replace that. Here we go. Have some water. Okay? Drink your water. Those are simple things. But when we're anxious, we tend not to do the simple things.
How about focusing in on God's word and meditating on his love and spending more time in his presence? That'll also calm the nerves a little bit and maybe some of the anxiety issues as well.
Absolutely. And that's why we need, maybe it's that 3x5 card again, and you're writing down a verse, and you're going to go out for that 20-minute walk and say that verse out loud, and watch what happens. There's a way that God uses scriptures that come alive to us. There is a renewal that can happen. Keep practicing it.
So, Dr. Jans, any final advice for those people who are feeling overwhelmed by anxiety?
Try not to do it alone. By the way, we tend to isolate under anxiety. It may be a time to have 2, maybe 3 individuals that you can really tell the truth, where you're praying together. If you've reached a point where it's so significant you feel some despair, that's really the time, though, to ask for help. That's the time to go, okay, I can't stay here. It's not a good place to be. My thoughts are getting more irrational. So there is a season, there is a time where I need to ask for help.
You know, there's one good thing about not a lot of sports taking place right now, actually being there to watch your team. You're a little less anxious, especially when they lose, right? So maybe that's one good thing about COVID. I don't know. Dr. Gregory Jans, author of the book, 7 Answers for Anxiety. Thanks for joining me today from Washington State.
Yeah, good to be with you.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.